Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to Simcyp technical webinar. My name is Champagne. I'm part of the translational DMPK group at Simcyp Certara, and I'll be your host today. So today's topic focuses on the endogenous biomarker module in Simcyp Simulator. Before we dive in, I'd like to kindly request that everyone stays muted during the presentation. Should you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or post your query in the chat box. We have a dedicated QA session at the end where we will address them. And next slide, please. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, my colleague, Dr. Matt Howard. Matt is a principal scientist at Translational DMPK Group at Simcyp. He joined Simcyp since 2007 and possesses a strong interest in transporter and metabolism. He has led multiple major or wishlist projects. I'm glad to have him with us today to introduce Simcyp endogenous biomarker module. The topic today will cover the features and behavior unique to endogenous compound slot, consideration for endogenous biomarker outputs, overlays, and the parameter estimation template, and also provide brief summary of available endogenous model compound files. Without further ado, I hand over to Matt. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shan. So I'm going to be starting off with the slides, a couple of slides just to introduce this and some of the basic behavioural concepts of the endogenous biomarker module, which people may not be familiar with because it came in version 23. I'll then navigate over to the simulator. We'll run some demos through various features and then into outputs and PE template in Excel. So the aim of this is to not go through every single screen of the endogenous biomarker or EB molecule files. But what I will do here is just cover some of the main mechanistic models that we have within the typical compound interfaces within this particular feature. So yes, we have the PhysChem blood binding screen, which is slightly revamped, but not majorly different. The absorption, we have first order and atom model in solution. Distribution carries only a full PBPK model. We have the full complement of metabolic elimination options. For the transporters, we have the transporters available in the atom model, permeability limited liver model, as well as the multi-compartment liver model, the mechanistic kidney model as well. We have those transporters. The endogenous molecule file can also be turned into a perpetrator because we have a competitive DDI on a host of enzymes and transporters. One novel aspect that I'll be covering later is particularly in respects to the internal synthesis, and I'll also cover a little bit on exogenous dosing as well. So my aim is to not go through all of the screens here, just to cover some of this at a high level in this slide. One thing I briefly want to just get you to think about, and this is a bit of a back to basics kind of story, is that when we have a substrate on and an inhibitor on within the simulator, what we typically do, if we look to the top right chart here, is we run a simulation in baseline. So you get the green baseline profile, and then you get an interaction. So you can see here the black line is the interaction. So you have two simulations running in the background, and then they're combined within the outputs to give you these profiles and DDI magnitudes. So the endogenous molecule file, when it sits in its endogenous position, which I'll show you in a second, is actually running as a second substrate. So it's really designed as a victim, but it does have perpetrator capacity. And so some of the behaviours with respects to understanding how the simulator performs can be a little intricate. And so I just wanted to show you here in these bottom two charts is if you had the simulator running with the endogenous biomarker on in its natural endogenous position, you also had a substrate on, but the biomarker file has no Ki values, then you'll just get a baseline simulation running. If you then added Ki values that could perpetrate a particular pathway on the substrate, and this is a substrate plot here, you would see an interaction, but you would only have a baseline output because you don't have another inhibitory interaction as such ongoing to allow you to compile both of the profile plots to be available. So you can see here that there's a change in the profiles indicating that it does have perpetrator capacity, but you'll have to manually calculate the interaction magnitude from these plots, for example. Okay, so that's a little bit of fundamentals behind the simulator engine. Okay, so on to the simulator. You can see here on the left-hand pane, we have this endogenous slot here. So that was added in version 23. And you can open that up with a simple click on the red cross to make it a green tick. Effectively, only an endogenous molecule file can be opened within this slot. And what I mean by that is if you go down to open the library file, go to Setup, you can see here that it's been flagged as an endogenous molecule file. That sets it up to have particular behaviours within the simulator that either enable or restrict functionalities depending on what you're trying to do. But ultimately, only endogenous molecule file types can be opened within this slot. If you try and open a small molecule file, that won't be happening. Okay. So another simple one just to cover for the moment, you want to create a new endogenous file. It's simply click on the endogenous library file there, new, in the file menu, new compound for endogenous. Then you have this usual box come up and you can select endogenous molecule here as a clean blank template, or you can utilize the baseline EB coproporphyrin 1, which is a library file that we have in the endogenous slot. So you can just activate it like that, go and then save it accordingly, and you'll have a blank template available to populate with the right parameters. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly show you that you can have some flexibility here. So if you just change the directory in the substrate to endogenous, so you can see here, if you go to the drop down, you can then pull up the coproporphyrin. So you can load coproporphyrin in the substrate slot. You'll get this message coming up that just indicates that it's an endogenous molecule file. There may be some limitations on what you can and can't do within this particular slot because it's a refined file. You'll notice here that no other slots are available. So effectively, you can use a substrate slot for the endogenous molecule if you want. And it's really just there for developing the file without any other interference if you wanted to do that. So if I just go and reset, okay, and I'll go and choose a small molecule again. In substrate, again, if I go and I switch the directory for the inhibitor, then you can again open up your endogenous molecule in the inhibitor 1 file. And you always have to have a substrate slot available within the simulator, whatever you do. So basically, the coproporphyrin here will then act as a classical inhibitor 1 file. You could provide Ki values and perpetrate pathways on the substrate, and you would get dual plots with interaction and without interaction from this slot. But if you did it from this slot, it wouldn't, and it would behave as a classic second substrate. Okay, so if I just go back and reset those directories. Okay, so I now want to open up let's just close that. So you can only have one endogenous molecule file open in the simulator at any one time. So I have to close that to enable opening the natural endogenous slot. And I just want to go through some key aspects of the endogenous synthesis screen. And this is a unique screen to to the endogenous molecule file type. And you can see here when we open up this screen, it's got a green tick, and we are able to effectively synthesize endogenously the biomarker. You'll notice up here we've got an others option selected by default. This is the typical selection for all biomarker or endogenous molecule files that you generate, with the exception of one, and that is a creatinine file that we are providing as part of the research file for version 23, which then will have that option open, and that then links into our covariate model for creatinine that's typically utilized for setting up GFR. So we have an inbuilt link to our own creatinine files with that research file, but it's pretty much always others. You can see here that we have a number of different options for enabling synthesis from different sites. So plasma, gut, liver, kidney. Typically, we've been looking at plasma generation of the biomarker files. And so here you can see we've got synthesis rate, open, and baseline level. So you need to provide a baseline level that can be from clinical data that you've perhaps gathered, or meta-analysis of literature if that data is available, and that can be populated here. So that sets your baseline level up. The synthesis rate, that can be tailored according to your needs and the model file. And effectively for this, we utilize the previous publication, and the synthesis rate can be impacted on by things such as body weight or the sex. So there's sex differences for coproporphyrin, for example, or ethnicity, and these options can be altered according to your needs, your population, your clinical trial. So there's flexibility within that. You could select removal rate, in which case you would need to provide a value in here, whatever that may be. And if you provide either removal rate or synthesis rate, and according to baseline level, the one that you don't select will automatically be calculated, and vice versa. So yeah, effectively that's the way this works. You can open up the intestine, liver, and kidney options. So if I just go down to dosing, and if I selected oral here for the endogenous file, that would enable me to open the ADAM model up. And if I also open the mechanistic kidney model up, you can see here that then I can select the intestine, the liver, the kidney, because those permeability limited models are required to be open for you to synthesize your endogenous molecule from the intracellular environments of those specific cell types involved in the transport, for example. Only one of these can be selected at any one time. So you couldn't have dual synthesis from plasma and liver, for example. It has to be via one. Okay. We'll just touch on some of the transporters available in coproporphyrin. So you can't just rely on setting up a synthesis rate and a baseline level for a given endogenous molecule file, for example. You would need to also populate it with PK specific relevant parameters. So we've got the OATP1B1 and 1B3 activities here, as well as MRP2, and this is effectively driving the disposition of that of this biomarker through the system, obviously alongside a volume of distribution term. And if you didn't populate these endogenous files with any kind of clearance mechanisms, then effectively you'll just get accumulation of the endogenous biomarker. So at minimum you probably need to add something like a renal clearance into to effectively get that steady state. So I already quickly showed you on the dosing panel of the trial design, endogenous has its own pane. So you could, if you wanted to, invoke exogenous dosing via a few selected options here. It's certainly not as wide-ranging as for a substrate, but there are a few administration routes here. So you could, in your file, dose endogenously, or rather synthesize endogenously, and also give exogenously. Occasionally happens in trials. You could just, as is more typical, just run it through the endogenous synthesis and not have any exogenous dosing, or you could switch off the endogenous synthesis and just have exogenous dosing. And then this would be more typically set up as a surrogate small molecule file. So it would still have the tag of the EB endogenous biomarker molecule file, but it would behave more typically with whatever parameters you wanted to put in as a kind of an exogenously dosed PK file. So yeah, I mean, there's flexibility in the dosing. I think next I will show you a basic setup of a workspace. So let me navigate to that folder there and open this workspace up. Just bear with it. Okay, so in the left-hand pane, we have a substrate as a PK probe. We have an inhibitor as a archetypal. This would be an OATP1B inhibitor. This is OATP1B and a BCRP probe. And we've got coproporphyrin sitting as an endogenous file. So you can effectively run a DDI study with both the substrate, the victim, and the inhibitor, the perpetrator, and then you have the endogenous running alongside it. So you can also evaluate this as a second victim and look at any magnitude of effect of the inhibitor, for example, here. I'd just like to draw your attention to the trial design, and something of note here is that, and this is more of an advisory than a strict rule, but you can see here that on the substrate and the inhibitor 1 dosing panes, we have both of these molecules being dosed on day 2. And the reason for that is that we want to let the model have an equilibration period. For coproporphyrin 1, the equilibration period to enable it to get to a steady state doesn't take very long. But to negate any kind of fluctuations with respect to initial distributions, etc., then we typically put the substrate in the inhibitor 1 to equilibrate for either 24 or 48 hours. That may be dependent on your endogenous molecule and how that behaves. But so yeah, getting the equilibration first and then running it as a PK, typical PK DDI study. So that's something that we would advise you do. We have had a look at the impact of with and without equilibration, and for coproporphyrin 1, and I've also looked at 1-NMN as well, which I'll come on to in a second. They're not particularly affected by equilibration or no equilibration. I just think it's better practice to get the steady state first. Okay, I think I'm going to move into the outputs now. So I'm not going to run a simulation just due to time constraints, although a lot of the time the CP1 performs reasonably or simulates reasonably quickly through. I don't really want to have that lag in this particular webinar. So I'm just going to show you here. So if you select concentration profiles, which is a very typical output to select, then if you've got the endogenous molecule open, you don't need to do anything further, because naturally the output will display the endogenous molecule profile. And as you can see here, so we've got the plasma concentration of coproporphyrin 1. Green line is the baseline level, and you can see there's multiple doses in this over looks like about a week, with interactions occurring as well, and you can overlay your data too. Here we show, just to the right of this is a magnitude of effect plot that just shows you the kind of the percentage change at each one of these dosing intervals and what's happening with the endogenous molecule file. So there's a couple of different ways just to display the magnitude of effect. We've been looking at renal or urinary data and the OCT2 and mates as well within the simulator over the last year or so, and so the MEC-KIM profiles, which you can output when that model is on, also displays endogenous biomarker profile data with and without interaction here in the urine and the kidney cells, for example. And any output that has a name or label in the sheet is EB is endogenous specific. So you can see here that we've got an AUC ratio that's specific to the endogenous molecule file. Again, if you wanted to look at the mechanistic kidney parameters to look at the renal clearance ratio for the endogenous molecule, then that's available in its own sheet as well. Okay. So that covers just a quite high level of the core outputs. I just wanted to quickly show you overlaying or setting up a PE template for the endogenous molecule. So this is pretty much a blank template, and I just want to draw your attention to selection of the compound here. So from the drop down, select endogenous, and then that will enable the any overlays or fitting to be done with regards to the endogenous molecule slot, so the natural slot it sits in. You can select route of administration as auto detect if it's an endogenously synthesized compound, and then it just knows that it's not an oral dosing route, for example. It picks that up. And if you select the endogenous here, when you go to select your dependent variables for your overlay or any PE optimization, then if you go down to the bottom of this, you can see endogenous plasma with and without inhibition, urine data, etc. So yeah, you can go and select those. And yeah, just when setting up the PE template with actual clinical data, it's no different from a small molecule file. It's just that you've set the file up to be endogenous with the endogenous dependent variables as well. And so what will happen is you'll get the overlay onto the correct plots. If you were to run an endogenous through in the inhibitor 1 slot, for example, then you would need to select the inhibitor 1 dependent variables here, and it would overlay on that plot and not the endogenous plots. So yeah, it's just a marker really that you need to have the slot specific variables open here. So in the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to very quickly show you a couple of features in respects to the creatinine file and the 1NMN file. Okay. So I just wanted to show you that point I made quite near the top of this demo. The endogenous creatinine here is selected for the creatinine file, and it feeds back through via the population parameters, the creatinine concentration. So you can find those on the kidney screen of the population library, and then that sets up the initial state of the file. And just to quickly show you that it would be a sensitive, or could be a sensitive biomarker for OCT2. It's got a small amount of OAT2, and it's also got MATE1. So that's something I've been looking at recently with respect to an inhibitor file of MATE1 and OCT2, and it is sensitive. And if I open 1NMN file, and this is again is another OCT2 and MATE biomarker. And what I wanted to draw your attention to more than anything here is that we, rather than having an endogenous synthesis on, we've set this up through custom Lua And my intention is not to go through this code, but this research file here is set up to have a diurnal variation. So you'll get a repeating variation over 24 hours. And so this code here allows that to be synthesized in that kind of manner and that behavior. So I just wanted to point that out. We also have a 4-beta hydroxy cholesterol with a parent cholesterol file. That is a 3A4 biomarker or 3A biomarker. That is not a pure endogenous molecule file, because we need to simulate the formation of 4-beta hydroxy as a metabolite. So it's set up as a small molecule file. Endogenous molecule files at present don't have the capability to form metabolites. So perhaps that's something we can look into in the future, but that will be set up as a small molecule file, and that can be picked up as well from the members area. So with that, Jan, I am finished, and I know this was at quite a high level of quite a wide area, but I just wanted to show you some of the key things that I think are important.
Thank you, Matt. Let's move to the Q&A session. So we'd love to hear what you are thinking or any questions you may have. While we're waiting for questions to come through, I'd just like to take a moment to ask a often asked question probably. So when we come to the compound development, particular for the endogenous biomarker, there any like required input parameter specific just for endogenous biomarker, or any parameter they are particularly important for developing an endogenous biomarker?
I mean, really, specifically, if you want to create the steady state from within the simulator, then the endogenous synthesis screen and/or options through custom Lua are applicable. You want to be kind of looking into those parameters first of all. You can utilize exogenous dosing if you wanted to, and that's been published in previous versions of Simcyp to generate biomarkers. So through IV infusion, giving that constant IV infusion over time, that's feasible. But really, all of the other screens, that you would populate those as you would need to, depending on the nature of the biomarker and what it's affected by mechanistically. So yeah.
Okay, so we got one question comes through. Actually more than that. So the first one is, do you have hydroxycholesterol in endogenous compound available in version 23?
It can be requested via the members area. So just to kind of expand on that a little bit, the creatinine, the N1-methyl nicotinamide, the cholesterol and 4-beta hydroxycholesterol are available as research files. We have not added them to the simulator libraries directly. They can be requested through the members area. So yes, if you do that, then we can provide those for you.
Okay, and the second question was, what does the CLR, the renal clearance in mechanistic kidney parameter, refer to?
The CLR, was that?
Yeah, and I think it
here.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the CLR ratio would be the ratio of renal clearance with and without the interaction. So that's something that we can look at through the mechanistic kidney model, taking into account both GFR and active secretory components, for example, as is built into this would have been, I think, an example of 1 NMN that I've kind of fudged into this workspace just for demo purposes. So yeah, this would be the interaction of OCT2 and MATE1.
Okay, I hope that answered your question. And let me just go through. We don't have any more at the moment.
Okay. Well, my email address was on one of the slides near the start. So if people are interested in more information on anything, then please send those through, or support@simcyp.com, and yeah, we can answer those questions.
Okay, so let's just have in the last slide or the.
Oh, sorry, I should be.
Yeah, if you don't
Bear with
mind
me,
sharing.
bear with me. Didn't mean to do that.
Okay, so
that
the last one. Yes,
Let me
please.
just bring it up into presenter mode.
So our next technical webinar is scheduled for the 28th of May. So in this upcoming session, Antonio will introduce Simcyp R package, especially these new features in the latest version. So if you're interested in, just stay tuned and don't miss out. Once again, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to see you soon. Have a lovely day and goodbye.